Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. We are here to have some fun today. Hope all of you guys enjoy this episode. And what I want you to do, everybody that's either listening or watching on YouTube, Rumble, wherever you're getting this and following us, I got Tom Meyers with me today again. One of my favorite guests, just because number one, the man's a Army Ranger, and you can't go wrong with that. And the second thing is having to what? How many years did you have total in law enforcement, including, FBI and detective and all that?
Yeah, 29, 30, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 30-something years. And you know what? There's a few others out there that I love having on that have that kind of experience. But always appreciate you coming on, Tom, and everything else. So we're gonna have I'm gonna throw some things at you today. And again, for those of you that are listening or watching on YouTube or Rumble, number one, subscribe. And number two, please hit that little bell so that you are always alerted when you get the episode. And number three, if you could write me a review, that would be fantastic. And the fourth thing I'm going to ask you to do is on some of the videos that you watch, especially, go down there and make a comment. Either, tell me how we've met or how you learned about the show. And most importantly, what you think of that particular episode. So your comments really help, and it's going to be fun because today, that's what we're going to do is we are going to respond to some of the comments that you guys have made on some of the videos that we've put out recently. And I want to start. So just so you know, this isn't a huge channel. We've had a couple of thousand new subscribers over the last couple of months, which is fantastic. Welcome everybody that's new. And there was one video in particular that it was a short. It was on YouTube, and it was crazy. Typically a really good short for us is 10 to 14, maybe 18,000 views. This video was with Betsy Brantner Smith, who's the national spokesperson for a police organization, and fantastic guest. I've had her on a couple times. She and I were talking about Director Cheadle from the Secret Service and how that whole fiasco with President Trump getting shot at and almost assassinated, and all the failures that Director Cheadle, that they're just, it seems like the more they dig, the more just utter catastrophe that whole scenario was, including the commander on the ground, who was another basically DEI hire. So just a disaster. But this video got almost 400,000 views. It was just crazy. And a lot of it was because of all the comments that some of you folks made. So I'm going to just kind of throw some of these comments out, and I'm going to get Tom. Tom's my guinea pig today. He is going to just basically respond to it. So, Tom, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I know
Jared.
This is kind of different than our standard practice here, but I think it should be fun. And all right, here we go. So it's crazy. I think the biggest category of response that I got was there were so many people that were just furious about what Director Cheadle not only allowed to happen from just sheer incompetence at that rally, at that Trump rally, but even more so, I think the way that when she was testifying in front of Congress, and how evasive she was, and how she just. So, Tom, what's the highest ranking officer or person that you've ever briefed ever sat down and, you were part of a bigger briefing and, had to brief your part? For me, it's a 1-star general. What's the biggest for you?
Yeah, Secretary of Homeland Security, I briefed. So it's cabinet level appointee.
Wow. Okay.
hmm
So when you went into that briefing, how prepared were you?
You better know everything. You better anticipate every question. You better war game it backwards and forwards. And if you're really good at it and you have a good cadre of folks that are out there, they're going to understand the personality of the briefer. Example, I don't want to go too deep into this, but the different people that I briefed, some are very much like judges and they want to read the warrant. Some want to be told a story. Some want to understand things graphically. So you adjust to that tempo. And of course, being under the crucible of Congress is no fun, no matter what. But you got to be very prepared for all different sorts of personalities on that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. But when you go into and that's kind of what the answer that I was expecting. I remember when I was going to go brief that 1-star general. He was a brigade commander, and man, I had all my ducks in a row. I was an NBC officer, and so everything, regarding his brigade that that I thought would be relevant as far as NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical damage, or not only potential damage, but also just what the enemy was doing. Everything about it. When I briefed them, I knew everything about the scenario that we were going through. And even I'd even gone into more of the intelligence, the S2 side of it. Yeah, I was scared to death. I was like, man, whatever question he throws at me, I'm either going to know the answer, I'm going to know part of the answer and get back to him, or I'm going to say, I don't know, sir, but I will get back to you as quick as I can. And I think that's basically the level. It's like briefing a CEO of a big company. If you're going to go in there with your personnel stats or whatever you're going to do, man, you had better have your ducks in a row. And yet, it's just infuriating to me when I see people like Director Cheadle go in front of a congressional committee under oath and just, it's like she was either absolutely incompetent or 100% corrupt, and that she was briefed and she was like, took the Hillary Clinton type of a route in which she was like, well, I just don't know, I don't recall, I don't, and how many other people have done that recently in front of Congress. It's like, are you kidding me? Someone under your uh protection, basically, you're the director, the buck stops with you, and you have absolutely no question or no answers to all of these questions, such as the details of the shooter, everything
Yeah.
about it. And so
Yeah, that's a
um
complicated You want me to jump right into it, Jared? I'm fine. I'm
yeah,
fine.
do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, first of all, why don't you tell me what your impression of that Director Cheadle talking to Congress? Let's kind
Okay,
of tie
so
in with that.
caveat here. I'm not an apologist for, any organization or agency, but I do try to give explanations to the public and folks and from my point of view. And I say that because a lot of people just get upset and they don't understand. First off the bat, and this is not to be supportive of anything like that. I'm just going to tell you what the circumstances are. So as that director, first and foremost, if somebody is trying to kill the president, that's a terrorist act. They're trying to influence government right away, right? That invokes a whole bunch of things that you have to be mindful of when you're speaking to people. That turns on that light right away, that switch right away. Let's take it another step. Even with that, you have to take other considerations like tactics, techniques, procedures, sensitive stuff that the Secret Service does that keeps those protection uh, protocols and those tricks and those things that they have in place to keep the president as safe as possible, a former president as safe as possible, any protectee as safe as possible, and they don't want to disclose those. A couple other things. There's this investigation that's ongoing, and the fourth part is there's just sensitive information that can go out there. So those four things in concert with probably another handful that it can't come to my mind at the right now, as what is being balanced in the head. So that's a very difficult thing to balance. Um, and then being called in front of Congress rather abruptly, you've got to anticipate that's going to happen, and you really need to have your staffers right in your back pocket right there, and probably have to go offline and stop the clock and then discuss that and then give viable answers to restore confidence to people over there. Because it's easy to Monday morning quarterback it, but if I was called in there at the spot, probably what I would have had was that cadre of people, and I would have pulled things offline and said, we've got to discuss this back and forth, and let me give you as straight an answer. But I wouldn't stall or anything like that. That's me. That's how I would come forth with that. I do think I do think Director Wray from the FBI, his explanations were pretty good as he stepped through that, and they were genuine. But that's days later. She was called right on the carpet right afterwards, and she got some bad information. No doubt she got some bad information. The sloped roof is the one of the biggest point of ridicule for her. In my mind, what I think has happened is the immediate piece of information that was sent to her was the slope of the roof, but they meant probably that higher building where you can't stop yourself from falling off. You fall 2 stories, you're going to be pretty solidly injured, and they can't put up a ladder to get to that. But I don't know if that's a viable explanation right there with the slope roof. I can take a break there and turn it back over to you, but that's just off the cuff kind of what I see happening. Those are the 2 biggest, like
Well, I
you said, the
understand,
stalling
but
and the kill points.
Those are details that I think. I mean, the sloped roof thing was just ridiculous. The number of memes that have come out on social media based on that is it's just hilarious. But that was just a complete embarrassment. But I'm just saying the overall, first of all, in a private sector, anybody that went in front of a review board or their somebody of authority like a CFO or CEO and gave that kind of a just completely I don't want to say she was being belligerent, but just avoided any kind of accountability, any kind of answering questions. If in the private sector, she would have just been fired. I mean, they just said, you know what, if that's the best you can do in this level of assumed competence, then you're the wrong person for the job. So bye. On the government side, the fact that she finally resigned, I think was absolutely appropriate. But if Mayorkas had any intestinal fortitude, he would have fired her immediately. But okay, but the bottom line is she was a complete catastrophe, and I'm not sure how deep that incompetence goes, but there were sure a lot of people that were fired up. Now let's get back to the whole. Okay, with that laid out there, let's talk about some of these actual comments that have been made on some of these videos that have been put out, especially the ones regarding the Cheadle, because there were hundreds and hundreds of comments on there, and I think by far the biggest one was this lady deserves to be thrown in jail for treason. So when you hear the word treason thrown out there, what's your first response?
Yeah, that's a strong charge to be throwing around out there. It's got to have some kind of predication to fire a charge off at somebody like that. So it's relatively meritless. I mean, just throwing that out. People are upset, and I get that. They're upset about it. I absolutely do. And that disconnect between the police and the Secret Service out there, I mean, man, you're in charge of all that. You're in charge of all that. And absolutely. I get it. Right.
Yeah. But, well, first of all, treason. I mean, treason is basically in a time of war, which we're not. But I mean, you've got to literally be, aiding and abetting the enemy. And I think that's, like you said, that's a strong statement. So throwing the word treason out there, be careful with that one, folks.
I don't even have the statute in front of me, the USC, 18 USC of what the charge is, and I don't even, walk down that yet. But if I had it right in front of me, I could read it. But
what? Yeah. So, but even the lesser thing, she deserves to, immediately be thrown in jail. And I'm like, okay, right now, especially in the political environment that we're in, there are so many people out there that on one side or the other are basically just saying, we, you know what, just throw him in jail. Whether it's throw President Trump in jail for bookkeeping errors and supposedly trying to steal the election. On the other side, anybody that's running in this current administration, they belong in jail. And so to me, one of the first things is, okay, I understand the passion, and believe me, I have my own opinions, and I'm just equally as passionate about it, which is another reason why I do this podcast and I wanted to do this episode. But the one of the first things we've got to do is stand back and say, okay, let's throw all the politics aside. What is the most important thing in order to maintain our system of justice? I want to throw that out at you.
The most important thing.
Yeah.
The most important thing is going to be, the blind lady up there, Lady Justice, applying the law equally across the board, and because that instills a sense of justice to people, that they're going to get a fair shake and they're going to get a fair look at all the way through, and then one side doesn't look to the other, and I think with an explanation, which is I hope what you and I are doing, is edifying. I'll back that up for a second. As a police officer, you had to stop somebody in a very aggressive way. It's a very upsetting thing, and they'll comply. Back in those days, they'll even comply, I think, these days, very much so, because it's a very heightened sense of guns aimed at everybody and everything else, but it's generally because something just happened. If you walk that back and you show evidence of what you did, like we had a blue Cadillac that just committed a bank robbery 10 minutes ago, and you're moving in the same area could you read it back for me? We didn't have the readers back in the day, the computer screens. If you could read that back to me, and they would, and be on the lookout for this, the people were okay, and they understood it completely. And I think if people get an explanation, they feel a sense of fairness, they're fine with it. Kellogg School of Management talks about that day of court. People feel edified. They've had their say, and they were given an explanation. So if you get that, and you get that explanation of way things happen, and they feel about it, and they shake their head yes and everything else, you can see that. Example, Chris Tapp. I think everybody would look at it and say, those cops, what they did was awful, but when you sit and talk to him, I mean, he's a very good, solid candidate for that because of his buddy. And I should add, Chris Tapp was an exonerated person who since died, was murdered. But what happened all those years he spent in jail, one of his colleagues was involved in a sexual assault, or at least allegations thereof. And so he fit that profile right away. And so nobody else kind of fit that profile. All of it makes sense, Monday morning quarterback or looking backwards or having that look to it. But it's important to be able to defend your steps and what was in your mind at that time period and be able to do that. So I think that's the most important part.
For those of you that don't know, Chris Tapp, and we've done lots of episodes on him. He was a young kid in Idaho. He was falsely imprisoned for 20 years for the murder and rape of Angie Dodge. And then once he was finally let out, a couple of years later, he was exonerated because they actually caught the guy that actually did it. And then sadly enough, within another 10 years, he was murdered himself. So yeah, the story of Chris Tapp is just one of those where it just goes on, and it's just unbelievable on every level. But like you said, the way that he was falsely imprisoned and was found guilty of murdering Angie Dodge when there was really just circumstantial evidence to get to it in the first place.
In support of the police, like I said, I'm not an apologist. I try to look at these things open-minded on each side, and I try to be devil's advocate for it. He made admissions, against himself, and he said that we know now that people can be cajoled and coerced into making false confessions and things. I don't think we knew that those years ago, and this is what happened. You sit down and you lean on somebody pretty hard, and you tell them and you accuse them, and they break and they say this, but we didn't realize that. To me, what always was get a piece of evidence that locks that in. Cause I telling you, we've both spoken to Francine, who did the MBAC examination on that, and she said everybody was sure that that DNA was going to come off of that plush toy, and it didn't. It didn't. So I have faith in that system. They can walk that back, and they're like, it all fit. It all fit. So
Yeah.
anyway, when you restore that justice, or restore that faith to somebody, everybody kind of is okay with it. It's when
Yeah.
it doesn't get restored. That's when things get to be dicey.
Yeah.
People don't
And
get a fair shake. Yeah.
the reason that I asked that question is because no matter what our political leanings are, or how we view a certain case or a certain event, like the Trump assassination attempt, um, ultimately the most important thing is that Lady Justice and our justice system is preserved. And so one of the problems, I think, with jumping to conclusions from it, regardless of which side you look at, one of the problems with that is it's damaging to the justice system as a whole. Now, if somebody like Chris Tapp or anybody, we've had all sorts of people on here, on not necessarily on the show, but that we've talked about where they were falsely imprisoned. I think that's horrible, and I don't ever want to see that. And I know every cop that I know hates to see when somebody is falsely imprisoned, because not only is it hugely damaging to the person that's incarcerated, obviously, but also
Mm-hmm.
the faith in our justice system as a whole is damaged. And to me, that long-term damage to the overall justice system is it's well, it's hard to explain, honestly, how damaging that can be to society as a whole. Our society cannot exist without a fair justice system. And there's lots of people right now that are talking about a two-tier justice system, and it just can't happen. It can't happen from either direction. And the more we throw out terms like treason and just throw them in jail and that kind of thing, um, you just can't do that. Okay, so that treason one is probably the number one that I got. Let's see. Boy, this is a good one. Good thing a man wasn't in charge of the assassination attempt. Oof, okay. Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory there. She should be thrown in jail and throw the keys away. Well, you know what? If there's an actual legit conspiracy behind all this, and it turns out that she was part of it, then yeah, there needs to be a trial, full investigation, and a trial. And if she's guilty, then okay, yeah, I'd throw away the keys. Just chime in here anytime you want,
Sure.
Tom, if you hear something. But the plot to kill Trump thickens as time goes by. I think Biden pulled his bid for re-election because he knows everything will eventually point towards him. Okay. All right. I'm gonna. There's also a few other. There's a few others that other episodes that we've done.
Questions from it?
Yeah. Here's one. Okay. Here's one. This is a different one. One of the things that this was a couple of years ago when all those riots were going on, and when I think was that summer 2020, then the summer of riots, basically, or the
sounds
if
about
you're up
right.
in
Yeah.
Seattle, that was the summer of peace, something like that. So the title of the video that we put out was how anti-police riots are destroying America. Okay, here's a comment that I want to throw out at you and get your opinion on this one. These people sign up to be cops. They know it's dangerous. That doesn't give them the right to be blank to citizens or violate citizens' rights. If they think that makes it too dangerous, quit.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a tough job. It's even tougher today to have somebody antagonize you. And the things that are really dangerous is when people are playing practical jokes on the police and they have to stave off what usually used to be, responses to it. It doesn't mean getting angry responses. It means somebody's making what could be perceived as a threat to them or doing something crazy, and they make videos, and it's very funny, to some folks. But we cannot get in the habit of antagonizing the police to the point that they don't care anymore. I mean, I don't really want to have an opinion on that, but if you do that enough to them, they're going to check out. They're just going to become like that scene from RoboCop where he was so confused between all those edicts they loaded in his head that poor RoboCop didn't know what to do. I'm dating myself there, but that's kind of what we have going on right now. Is nobody is able to police, so we've turned a lot of these guys into very passive, just so they don't end up on YouTube. And nobody wants to be publicly outed or set up for scrutiny, and certainly not named in a lawsuit. And so you've neutered a lot of the proactive policing that can take place. And I'm trying to say this without too much personal opinion on that, but think about the both sides of it. That being said, how many of us when we were kids was handled brutally by the police, spoken to, where the police officer's supposed to be your friend, and you always got that one guy in the squad or the shift that can't shut his mouth and's got to be antagonistic. And if you accept that guy, well, that becomes the way. Well, it's hard to ostracize that guy when he's got your back. Go to the John Bernthal movie, the scene here from We Own the City, back in Baltimore where I worked at. I had very little to do with that case, but the gun trace task force. But as they cited him on HBO, he was very much a good cop and took care of people and everything else. Problem was, what they brought forth in the trial and everything else. He's a thief and he's stealing, and he's involved in all sorts of illegal activity. But somebody who is so productive and is so willing to jump into the fray and help other people out, that's a hard, a very hard blue line to cross over. I say that because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen the public corruption side. I've had to do some of the searches on these things, and I see the aftermath of these things over here. So I hear both sides, but I hate to say that 99% of police are good. It's like, man, these guys are out there trying to do a job. They really have joined for the right reason, and if they're not righteous police, they're really going to be pushed to the side. They're not going to be in the detective bureau. They're not going to be earners. And earners, I mean producers. So, that's found out pretty quickly. So as a tough position they're in right now. But I would say, give them a break. How about that? Don't antagonize them. There's a movement afoot now to give them that 25-foot space, and that's only right and proper to let them do the doggone jobs. And if you don't do that, what you're going to see, what we're seeing in the UK right now with the moped thefts that are going on, is vigilantes taking place. The other bikers are running these guys off the road because they don't want to lose their motorcycles. They don't want their insurance going up. So that's what you're going to see if we don't get it together here, folks.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.